What's going on, everybody? This is the ChondroCast, the podcast for green tree pythons and the people that keep them. I'm your host, Justin Smith of Palmetto Coast Exotics. Enjoy the show. It's like my sinuses and stuff are fine outside of the four walls of this house, but as soon as I get in, it's just like anytime we record, my nose gets all stuffy and my throat gets scratchy. And
yeah, I've been allergic to cats since I was little.
I've never been allergic to cats, but I know it doesn't take much to get sensitized to them.
Yeah.
But we are going now. So this is episode 2 of the ChondroCast. Here with Mr. Brian Fischer of Front Range Arboreals. How's it hanging?
Pretty good. Just sitting in the snake room, staying warm.
Yeah. You're getting snow there, I'm assuming?
Not today, maybe tonight. Yeah, here more than anywhere else. We were just talking about, I lived in the Northeast, I lived in the Southeast. Out here in the West, the weather is definitely much more unpredictable. They might say there's like a chance of flurries and then we'll get 6 inches of snow.
How do you like living in South Florida?
South Florida itself was pretty cool. After living there for 5 years, for me, it was kind of like Groundhog's Day. When you wake up, it's still warm, it's still sunny. It rains every day.
Yep, the 3 o'clock thunderstorm for an hour, and then it goes away.
Yeah. So, and my wife and I are both from Pennsylvania originally, so we kind of missed the seasons. I snowboard and do some winter activities, so we missed all that. And I found, at least for the type of career that I do, and my wife kind of had the same experience, the job outlook isn't that phenomenal in South Florida, so we kind of decided to move on after about 5 years of it.
Yeah, I got family in West Palm Beach, and I always enjoyed going and hanging out there, but it is definitely not a place that I'd have any desire to live.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's definitely got pluses, but after 5 years, it kind of ran its course,
Mm-hmm. Do you like the herping out there more? Out of all the places you've been, what's been the best place that you've enjoyed, if you've done any?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, definitely the big draw about it is you can get species that are all over the world.
Yeah.
in South Florida, I mean, iguanas, Nile monitors, chameleons, day geckos. There's all sorts of crazy stuff down there. Berms, obviously. So it's definitely interesting. There's always the possibility of finding something that you're like, oh, I didn't realize that was out here.
Yeah. There's a new species being found every year.
Yeah.
I have seen some of those veileds though that people find out there, and some of those veileds are huge. Yeah. I mean, it's a perfect environment for a lot of tropical herps. Mm-hmm. And that's what I explained. I get a lot of people who ask, they hear that I'm a snake guy when I'm at work. So I work at a cigar shop, and a lot of my day involves sitting around and talking to people. And a lot of them, they see that I have a snake tattoo, and so they start asking questions, and they're like, oh, Florida, they got all those invasive boa constrictors and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, Florida's got a lot of problems right now. And I said, I explained to them that it just, by chance, Florida happens to be like prime habitat for just about anything that's semi-tropical or tropical.
Yeah, people like to make a big deal out of the berms and stuff, like, because they're the obvious big scary monster in the Everglades, but I do water treatment for a living,
mm-hmm.
and their water situation there is real messed up. It's worse than any of the invasives that they have there.
In terms of just like cleanliness,
just like environmental.
Oh, okay.
they got like all this farm runoff, and yeah, it's not a good situation.
Hmm.
Not to mention that, my personal opinion, feral cats and arguably brown and old might
Yeah.
even be worse for the biodiversity there than berms. But uh,
Hmm.
yeah,
So what do
yeah. I
you?
mean, I don't know how much time you spent down there, but brown and old, like it's hard, at least where I was, to find green anoles down
Yeah,
there.
I definitely saw probably more browns than I saw any of the greens or anything else.
Yeah,
These things are
they've just
everywhere.
outcompeted them to the nth degree.
So in terms of what you're currently keeping, are you keeping just green trees, or do you kind of have some other odds and ends?
I got a pretty small collection, and that's mostly just kind of a result of moving so frequently.
Right.
Um, but I've got, let's see, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven adult chondros and one 2-year old, two babies. I got one egg that's about to hatch like any second now. And I got a pair of poplin carpets,
Ooh.
a pair of Spilotes pilatus, the
Yeah.
Suriname, Guyana tiger
Those
rats.
look fun.
And then I've got a few ornate day geckos.
Mm-hmm.
That's about it right now.
Is that one egg just? Is it a chondro egg? How'd you end it with just one egg?
Yeah. Well, that was the only fertile egg. I had 13 slugs along with that.
Mm.
Um, and I'll eventually post pictures of it, but it was a pretty gnarly egg.
Huh. Do you prefer having a smaller collection like that compared to something bigger? With a lot,
Yeah, I mean,
especially like in chondros, because I kind of have the opinion that with chondros, kind of having a smaller collection might be more the way to go than rather than something massive.
yeah, I mean, I kind of feel that way about any species of any animal for the
Mm-hmm.
most part. Um, I don't know how far you want to get back into my background, but prior to being in water treatment, I was the manager for a wholesale saltwater fish import business in South
Oh, okay,
Florida.
cool.
So we would bring in like anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 fish a week.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also like live corals and invertebrates.
Right.
And most of it's wild caught stuff. You bring it in, you treat it, and then we would ship it to like retail stores and public aquariums and whatnot. And there's definitely there's definitely a point of diminishing returns with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, at a certain point, you can't really get eyes on an animal for very long each day. And, in particular with a lot of these tropical animals, and they're pretty sensitive and they hide illness and stuff. It's just, I don't think, I think there's a point where, there is too many.
Mm-hmm.
And, the way herpetoculture is these days, everybody just, I think we talked about this a little bit um, via messenger. I think, I don't know if it was completely that ball pythons were to blame, but at some point numbers got conflated with experience
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
expertise. And I find it's actually kind of the opposite. Some of the guys that are only keeping like 8 or 10 animals have, if you look at percentage of success um, with how many pairings they do and all that, they actually have more success per year than a lot of these bigger guys do.
Yeah. Just because they were able to devote more attention to those handful of animals rather than
Right. Yeah.
trying to spread themselves a little too thin.
Yeah, they're paying a lot more attention to behavior. They notice stuff more because they're looking at a few animals as opposed to hundreds that might be in tubs.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing. Me personally, I'm not a big fan of tubs just because you can't really see the animal without disturbing it.
Mm-hmm.
not that you can't keep them just as good in a tub, but from a uh, observation perspective, you can't do it the same way you can in a cage.
So how do you have all yours set up?
I got a variety of different cages, PVC, boaphile, visions, but they're all cages. They're all front opening.
Mm-hmm.
I can see in all of them.
Gotcha.
I do have a small rack that I use for like the babies, but as soon as they're kind of a little bit bigger, I move them into cages.
Yeah. Because I'm kind of torn between the whole thing too. I mean, I keep how many of mine? I currently have, as far as chondros go, 3. No, I have 6. 3 of them are in tubs. 4 of them are in tubs. 2 of them are in PVC cages. And the way I use the tubs, they're not in a rack system. Me and Jake, who I do the herpeticulture podcast with, we do what we call a poor man's rack. And it's basically one of those metal chef's racks.
Right.
But we have we run we get the 4-foot long ones, and then we run the Reptile Basics Ultratherm pads, the length of it. And then we just have the individual tubs sitting on that. And so we I started doing that sort of on the basis of kind of like what Harlan talks about, where if you have a sick snake and it's in a rack system, you kind of have nowhere to put it. But with this, I can just as easily take it off the shelf and move it into my room. It works just as well. If I have any neonates that are being weird and they need to be blacked out for whatever reason, then I can just, put some paper. I take just an empty cardboard box and open it up. So it's, how you can stick your hand through it when you first put a box together. And
right.
Just putting that around it and calling it a day. So that's been working out pretty well for me. But I can definitely understand why racks, for neonates especially, it helps them out a little bit as far as security goes and everything like that. And I also like the naturalistic thing, but that's also when you have a kind of a bigger collection, it's not exactly something feasible. And I'm much more of a sterile, keep it simple, stupid kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. All my cages have live plants and the whole deal. I'm the longer I keep these things, the more I kind of focus on air quality.
You've sent me pictures of your stuff before, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, you got like pothos and stuff in there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of pothos. I try to keep a good amount of ventilation, and then I humidify the room with like an evaporative humidifier.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the way I do it. I try not to have anything stagnant, and I try to get a good amount of air exchange. I really think, a lot of people will talk about, sealing stuff up to maintain humidity.
Right.
I really think that's the wrong way to go. These things are living up in the trees. They're exposed to a lot of air movement. And, think about it this way. Do you think that any epiphytic plants would survive in most of the cages that people keep chondros in?
No,
like
not unless they had the background or some way of mounting them,
Well, but I mean, like air movement is very important for those things, along with high humidity. And that's, I kind of try to, the plants are as much for aesthetics as they are for telling me if I'm maintaining the cage too wet or too dry or any of that, because if the plants aren't thriving, then, it's like a non-starter at that point.
Yeah, it's kind of an indicator of what's happening.
Right.
That's a good way of thinking about it. I wouldn't have really thought about that.
And, things like pothos and stuff are well documented that, doing very good for air quality, scrubbing the air and stuff, taking stuff out. So, I like to have live plants in there. I'm kind of moving towards, doing bigger enclosures, more live plants, and less animals over time.
It's not a bad strategy to have.
Yeah, yeah. I can guarantee you that I enjoy my animals more than most people that keep them in plastic boxes.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to how many, are you spreading yourself too thin by having too many, either too soon or just on hand, period. And I know personally, like I have times where, I get caught up in the day to day of, working and stuff like that, and just kind of being in and out of the room and doing what I need to do, and then kind of moving on with my days off or whatever. But there are still times where, I pull out my big Brettles mail or something, and you just kind of take a moment and stop and realize that you don't really appreciate him as much as you should be. And it's super easy just to get caught up in the day to day, the grind.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, and definitely, with the advent of Facebook and how this hobby has kind of moved to that from the forums and everything, you're constantly inundated with people posting all these pictures of newly hatched babies, their new additions and everything. You're like, man, like I want something new. I want to hatch more eggs. But every time I've kind of moved towards increasing my numbers, I just find that I have less time to actually do anything other than just clean cages. And that's not fun.
Yeah, at some point it does get to be almost a chore of sorts. I know when I was dealing with cresteds, when I was breeding those, like Sundays were my cleaning days, and like half my Sunday would be eaten up just by cleaning tubs. And there were, towards the end before I got out of them, I was just like, man, this is not, fun anymore. And just kind of, they require so much more time and more effort and more work. And it's just, that's when I kind of decided it was time to get out of them. I wanted to focus on snakes, especially chondros, right. And it was just, I think a lot of people, though, they struggle to kind of to realize that and actually do it. And so instead they just suffer through it and post their pictures for, Instagram and Facebook. And that's kind of my issue with Instagram and stuff as a whole, is like, I don't just, people do it, post pictures and stuff just for the attention they can get. Whether they actually enjoy it or not is one thing, but I don't know. That's it's getting
absolutely
crazy.
One thing for sure is that it's been with that switch over, on the forums. I don't know how long you've really been into it, but back in the forum days, like, you were kind of guaranteed that anybody who took the time to post on that stuff was, legitimately into it and interested in it, and like that's all they thought about. But now it's kind of hard to separate, who's really into it, who's just kind of looking for attention because they've got a cool animal, like, they buy like a dragon snake, have no idea what they're doing, but they're gonna get thousands of likes on Instagram. It's hard to separate the real people from the people who are just in it for that sort of thing.
And I've talked about the forum thing before, because I mean, I was never really active on it. Like, I used to be, back in the Morelia Pythons days. I had an account on there. I had an account on MVF. I never really posted. I was always just kind of a lurker, and that's how I am in the groups now.
Right.
But I really think there was sort of a filter with forums to where if somebody really wanted to be on there, you actually had to go through the process of registering, confirming your email. Even though as simple as all that stuff was, that kind of separated people from the ones who actually wanted to join and were actually interested in what was going on, and the ones who weren't. But with Facebook and it now being just as simple as, the join group button, and then you have free reign, I feel like that's sort of what divided the forums from the people that were actually invested in it. And then Facebook, which is just the folks that are there to ask a question and then leave.
Yep.
But
yeah,
it's unfortunate, but I think it's a natural progression of just the internet and where things are now.
Yeah.
As soon as the group things started taking off, I was like, man, this is going to hurt a lot of the forums. And I mean, it was bound to happen at some point. We couldn't have expected forums to survive forever. It just wasn't really feasible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a lot of the problem with it too is there's just so many of them, and it's hard to really keep straight who's like I said before, who's legitimate, who's not.
Yeah.
And at this point, me personally, I just kind of ignore most people's posts unless, they post often and it's obvious, what they're doing or what experience they have, or if it's one of the older people that I've known for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, other than that, I kind of have to ignore it because I just don't have the time.
Yeah, and we talked about that too when we were messaging back and forth. Is like you notice the guys that have been in the hobby the longest and have the most experience are often the most, the quietest when it comes to posts and groups and stuff like that. And the more time I spend in groups, which I'm really not in a lot now, I ended up leaving a bunch of them because it's exhausting to just watch just the chaos and people just really losing their minds. But you notice the older guys don't post as much, and like I said, as time goes on, I kind of understand why, and I don't really blame them. When you have all these people that are so eager to help people out, even though they may or may not have that much experience.
Right.
If they know that someone's going to answer a question that's asked daily in these groups, like what's the point of having to pipe up when you already know someone's got it covered? So
yeah, and like if like sometimes I'll see a post and I'll be like, well, I have something of value I think I can add, but I don't want to deal with all of the secondary questions from people who aren't the one that asked the question. So I'll just message them directly. Kind of like I did with you about the MI stuff. It's a much more efficient use of my time, and you actually, I think, help people out more that way.
Definitely. And you talked about that a little bit. What's been your experience with the maternal incubation as far as like how many females have you done it with, and how did that work out for you?
So I've done it with 2 females. The first one was about what was it? Probably like 2004, 2005, around there. She I didn't know it at the time because I just kind of left her alone to do her thing, but she ended up having a whole bunch of slugs, and there was one fertile egg in the clutch. And I checked on her about halfway through and kind of could see some slugs in there. And so I decided to pull her thinking, it's probably just all slugs. Why keep wasting my time with this?
Yeah.
Then there was that one fertile egg. It ended up hatching, but it was a pretty small runt. Looking back, I think it just exited the egg too early. But at that time I was like 17 or 18, and that was not nearly as much information back then as there is now. So that was kind of how that went. It was a Biak type that I raised from like a red yearling, pretty obviously wild caught looking back on it now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, she wrapped the eggs fine, sat in there fine, no issues with that. It was more just me getting nervous and not knowing any better, and seeing a few slugs and overreacting basically. I think if I would have left her, that one egg probably would have hatched just fine. And another thing I hear about when people talk about MI and how people shouldn't do it is that they're afraid that bad eggs or slugs are gonna ruin the clutch. And from my 2 experience, that's couldn't be further from the truth. The bad eggs and the slugs, they just dry up, and just turn like hard as a rock, and they don't affect anything. And the second one was last year. It was a Biak to a Biak sarong, or a Biak. It looked like a Biak, but it was sold to me as a Biak sarong as an adult. So I don't know. Regardless, it was a pure, as they're currently classified, as Zergus, northern animal. And she ended up having 12 fertile and 2 slugs. And I could tell when she laid the clutch that there was, a bunch of good ones on top. So I just kind of let her be. For her, I moved her. Uh, I had a nest box in the cage, but she was entering it and exiting it, and then around uh, what I estimated to be about a week out, it was like day 42 or 43. I moved her to a 14-quart rack, just filled with like sphagnum, and I threw a towel over the top of the tub, and I just kept that at 84. And she laid him there and did fine. She wrapped the clutch fine. I think she kicked out one good egg that I wasn't able to hatch. So I'm sure there was some reason she kicked it out. And yeah, she did pretty good up until I want to say it was like day 34, 35, somewhere in there. About 2 weeks left to go.
Yep.
And then she just kind of like loosened up and looked like she was going to abandon the clutch. So I pulled it and threw him in the incubator. I'm not sure how long exactly she was loosened up on the clutch at that point. But the eggs were not up to, a normal temp. They were, I want to say they were like 78 or 80 degrees. Which shouldn't impact them too much.
It shouldn't be a
but,
massive.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So I transferred the mass to the incubator. Most of them ended up going to term, but a bunch of them left the eggs early, and I ended up with 3 hatchlings that are alive today. One is with John Irby. He owns the male. And I've got two right here that are about 8 months old now. And like I told you before through Messenger, I think part of my mistake, and I think everybody probably has done this at some point. I think I was just messing with her too often or checking in on her too often. And that's part of the chondro community is in particular has a way of making you very paranoid about everything.
That's an understatement.
And it'll creep in your head without you even thinking about it. And I would just you hear everybody make all these statements about how bad of a choice it is to do MI and all that, and what if she abandons them and all that sort of stuff. And that gets to you, and I was just checking on her a lot, and I think that might have been part of what contributed to whatever that was that happened the last couple of weeks.
And how often were you checking on her though? Like what kind of...
Honestly I don't even really remember. I just know it was fairly often.
And if you were doing it again, how often you would be how often would you be checking on her now? If you had bred another female and you were doing MI, what would you do differently?
I would probably poke a little bit when I saw they were laid, just to make sure that it wasn't a clutch of, mostly slugs.
Right.
And if it was mostly fertile, at least from what I could see, not open it until like day 47 to check in there. I wouldn't look at it at all, and I also mentioned, I don't know where I saw it. It might have been in one of Dan Malari's videos, or it might have just been a picture I saw. I can't remember. But I know, at some of those farms, like in Indo, they have these things in like little styrofoam boxes.
Yeah.
They're all covered up, completely sealed, and they just have them in stacks.
Yep.
And they don't touch them, and that's probably how I would do it now. I think most of those concerns over females leaving has very little to do with the female not being able to do what she's supposed to do. I think it's more keep her.
I don't think we give the animals enough credit. Like, they know what they're doing. This is something they've been doing for millennia. This isn't anything new. This isn't, it's not like we can't trust them to lay these eggs. Like, anything that would cause a failure on the part of MI is going to be on us and not the snake. Because the snakes, they know what they're doing. And I feel like everyone's just like, for sure, the female's going to lay, and then it's like, oh my God, she's going to abandon it, and I know it. And it's like, you just this green trees are just anxiety inducing, and it's so funny because I think
it's really not them though. It's the people that seem to be attracted to
yeah, definitely. It's funny because it's just they're really not. I tell people all the time because I have people message me on a semi-regular basis saying, hey, how hard are green trees? And I'm like, they're not hard at all as long as you give them what they need. They're not coins. Yeah. They're not Boellens or diamonds either. They have these. If you stick within these sort of parameters of what they need in terms of like their natural history and stuff, you'll be fine. But if you overthink it, you're gonna you can overcare them to death.
Yeah, for sure. And I've never really found, I've been keeping them since 2000. I've never really found the species as a whole to be difficult to keep.
Yeah, agreed.
My difficulties have been with breeding, and each situation has been different as opposed, as to why I think it may not have gone perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as keeping them alive, they're very, very simple. And I also think we do them a disservice by simplifying it so much and babying them so much.
Yeah.
Like I said before, I'd be keeping mine with live plants. I use organic soil. I use all this different stuff. And it doesn't affect them the way that a lot of these people would have you believe, where they need this hermetically sealed box that's sterilized every day, and
mm-hmm.
they're a lot more sturdy than people give them credit for.
Yeah, and me and Jacob were having a conversation about that the other day. I was like, these things are a lot tougher than we realize, especially after reading Julander's book. I think that was a conversation we had on THP the other night when we had Julander on. Is these things, they experience some considerably fluctuating temperatures for the most part, depending on what part of PNG you're looking at. But that's another thing. I don't think we give them enough credit. Like they're pretty tough. It's just when you screw up, they're kind of unforgiving, and it's I don't know, and that's kind of what I tell people. Like I said, they're not hard snakes to keep. You just got to pay attention to some of the smaller details, unlike a lot of other species where it's like, yeah, hot spot's somewhere around, 86, 88, whatever. I don't have to worry about it too much, It's just, they get overthought a lot. And I think that ties into people just spending as much money on them as they do. They assume, I think it's more of afraid of taking that kind of a loss. They just spent $400 on an imported chondro, and then they want to make sure like I said, they care it to death. They're so worried about it dying that they worry so much that they end up doing too much and killing them anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I've known lots of people, in the almost 20 years I've been keeping them there. They'll be all gung ho. They'll get a bunch of animals. They'll keep them for a few years, and then at some point, after they don't have very much success breeding them, they get out and they're just like, it's just, it's not worth it to keep feeding these things. I'm not getting any return on them. And that's where you separate, like I was saying before, the people who are really into the animals and the people who got into it because, maybe they thought the snakes were cool, but it was more the money thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I heard like Forrest say this once. I don't remember where it was, but it's like it's just a big Ponzi scheme. Like there's very, very few people making any money off these snakes.
Yeah.
At best they might break even, but even that is a rarity. It was the same thing with tropical fish. We were doing it on a large scale, and even we were barely making any money. And eventually the business closed down, and that's why I ended up moving.
Yeah, and me and Jacob have had plenty of conversations about that, where it's like, man, it'd be so cool to be able to do this full time, whatever. And I know it can be done, but I also know that it's pretty much a pipe dream because
it can be done, I'm sure.
You got to carry the spectrum. You can't just carry snakes. You can't just sell the stuff you like. You got to carry tortoises and lizards and all this, feeders. Like you literally have to span everything because it's such a niche market as is. That you can't carry the stuff you like and expect to be able to live off that unless you're, homeless.
Yeah. Yeah, and for the most part, you're talking about moving volume,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and when you're moving volume, you're caring for that many animals. It really does suck the life out of the passion for the thing. You know
Right.
that when I was maintaining, it was me and I had two people working under me doing most of the husbandry for the fish stuff, and I was working like 60 to 70 hours a week, salaried, and we were barely making it.
Mm-hmm.
And that just kills any sort of interest you have in these things when you're spending that much time on it and you can barely
Yeah.
barely even take 5 minutes to just appreciate what it is you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I think I've heard Barczyk talk about that, and that's kind of why he's moving toward that whole reptile zoo thing
Yeah.
and kind of doing less of the commercial breeding, because it does. There's no way around it. It doesn't matter how passionate you are. If all you're doing is changing out water bowls and cleaning bedding, and you do that 24/7, 365,
Mm-hmm.
get no days off. Most people don't think about that. You can't take vacations.
Yep.
It wears on you.
Yeah. I didn't go on vacation last year because which was November, is when I would have gone, and I didn't just because I had seen so many locks with my pairs, with my pair that I put together, that if she was going to ovulate, I was really worried that I would miss it within that week long period that I'd be gone, and some other work stuff. So I didn't go just for that reason. But yeah, it's definitely hard to make ends meet when you're rolling on a scale like that, and then there's so much to it that people don't realize.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not nearly
And
as simple as they think it is.
yep, yeah, it's definitely not for everybody, and um, it goes to show what it really is when people that have been doing it for such a long time, like Barczyk and others, eventually they like, this just isn't worth.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze anymore.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, as far as with your keeping them in your chondros and natural setups, have you kept yours in tubs, and have you noticed a difference between the behavior wise of the two?
Yeah. So I mean, I've kept them simply before. I have a pretty stellar pair of Arus that I'm acclimating now, and I keep them on paper towels pretty much right now, just
Mm-hmm.
because I want to be able to see, any sort of creepy crawlies that
Yeah.
come out, just so I know kind of when treatment's been successful. I'll eventually have fecals run again, but for now, kind of just want to see what's going on. But I'll eventually move them to something different. As far as the tubs go, I mostly just raise the babies up in those just for space sake.
Mm-hmm.
But I've raised baby chondros in normal size enclosures, like I have these 16 by 16. I think they're like 21. I've raised babies up in cages that size, but I'm also raising them in kind of cages with plants and cover and all that.
Yep.
And I think people kind of confuse the reasons why tubs work better for this stuff. Is because if you keep these things in a empty box and it's a little baby, they're not going to feel very
Mm-hmm.
very secure, protected, however you want to say it, in an empty box. And in a tub, especially if you're keeping them in a 6 quart, or like I have these I want to say they're 12 quart. They're like the same footprint as a 6 quart, but they're 8 inches tall.
Yeah.
They're always covered from the top,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's more of the reason why they do so much better in tubs as opposed to a bigger cage for a lot of newer people, is because they read all this stuff about having to keep them in these sterile boxes with nothing in there, and there's no cover. And these things are just completely exposed, and well, they're all stressed out, and it's probably why they don't eat a lot of the time.
Yeah, definitely got the odds stacked against you.
Yeah,
when you're not giving them what they want.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of gotta understand the psychology of a snake. They're a very vulnerable creature in the wild, and if a lot of the pictures you see of these things in the wild when they're resting, they're under a leaf. Or they're covered. And I'm sure they get picked off by birds and all sorts of stuff pretty easily
babies.
If they're exposed.
Considering how tiny babies are when they come out of the egg, they're food for anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and they're not exactly hard to spot. They're pretty bright colored. So, yeah, I mean, as far as being able to maintain them successfully, I haven't found a huge difference as long as you understand what it is that they need to, do well and not be stressed out and all that. Like I've heard a lot of people talk about that they can't keep them in cages well, and it's not the snake and it's not the cage. You're providing something wrong with that. You're not providing cover, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's not that it's a cage. It's that you're not fully grasping whatever is missing from that cage. If you put a ball python or something else in a cage and it has no hide, may not eat.
Yeah.
Kind of the same deal.
I have one baby from Luke Myers that I got a couple months ago. This would have been back in August or September, I think. And it was rocking and rolling with him as far as food goes. And then I get it, and it completely starts going on a hunger strike. And so I kind of look at it from the top down or bottom up, whatever, as far as, okay, what could possibly be missing or what needs to go, like, check temperatures, check all this stuff, like just basically start going down the list of potential causes for why it doesn't want to eat. And I didn't have anything in there with it as far as cover or foliage, and so then I had some little fake plastic suction cup plant that I got from PetSmart, and so I put that in there and gave it a few days, and then I tried it again, and it started kind of coming back. And now I took it away at one point because I was like, okay, it's eating regularly now, no problem. It doesn't need it. The thing kept going into the water bowl, and it was probably making the water gross, and so I was like, whatever. So I pulled it out, and then it stopped eating again. And so then I took it and I put it back in, and of course we started nailing food again. So now I just keep it in there full time. But even something as small as that, because I mean, even with that in there, it's still like, it's not a ton of foliage to where I have to like literally dig through it to find it. It's it's right there. But I think even something as small as that, makes a difference.
Yeah, I mean, something that simple. It has nothing to do with heat. It has nothing to do with humidity. It's more of a psychology, animal behavior solution. And I don't think we give these things enough credit. They're just because they sit there and they look like they're not thinking. There's a little bit of a method to the madness, I think, and they know what they want and they know what they're doing a lot of the time. It goes back to that student of the serpent type thing.
Definitely.
And people always talk about animals will always go to the highest perch, and I think that has more to do with them trying to seek cover because the highest perch is close to the top of the cage. If you have an empty cage, that's the only cover that's available.
I don't even know that it's necessarily the highest one. I always think they just go for the thinnest one. Because I used to rock. Sometimes. Yeah, I used to rock like the. What was it? I think I was rocking 1-inch perches in my adult that I had my pair in, my adult PVC cage. That's a 4-footer. And then I was talking to Harlan, or I was reading something in MBF or one of the groups, and they were talking about, go with 1/2 inch or 3/4. So I tried that, and I had 2 perches in there. One of them I put 1/2 inch, and one of them I kept the 1 inch, and they instantly were gravitating to that 1/2 inch on a regular basis. So definitely, I think there's something to that. And I know emeralds are pretty similar in the fact that when they're found in the wild, they're usually on a ridiculously thin branch. And it kind of makes sense, because when you have more surface area like that, kind of putting pressure on the spine and the organs and stuff, the way they sit, it makes sense to me why they'd naturally go with something a little thinner.
Yeah, definitely.
Because even in my male's tub right now that I just separated, he has one of those dragonfly perches from Brahms, and he loves that thing. He doesn't even sit on the PVC pipe that it's on. He just stays on that dragon perch pretty much full time now. He loves it.
Yeah.
Shout out to David.
Yeah, I mean, most of my males will go to the heat panel cord, and they like to sit on that, but they'll come down at night and they'll get in their hunting spot. But yeah, I mean, that's another thing, is they will move if you give them some stimuli and some reason to move. But if you keep them in a pretty bare small box, what reason do they have to move?
Right. And then, after talking to Jewlander the other night too, I kind of made me think more, because he was talking about chondros and them moving when they start getting hungry. They start to change their hunting positions at night and stuff like that. And the more I thought about that, when they have more space like that to move, where I guess, like, say that 4-foot PVC I have my pair in, my female right now, and granted I'm hoping to have an ovulation here soon, she moves back and forth all day long between the hot end and the cold end. She's just constantly moving, and I think about that, and I'm like, even that little bit of exercise is still better than what they probably would get in a regular 2-foot cube.
Yep.
And so it kind of made me think more, like, if I'm going to keep adults, I might want to look more into keeping them in these longer cages like this, where they're forced to use that gradient. And because, like I said, man, all day long, like every time I walk in the room, she's either on the hot end or the cold end. It's pretty rare that she stays in one for most of the day.
Right.
And so she's, like I said, she's just always moving. I was like, after talking to Julian, I just thought about it. I was like, man, we should probably be using longer cages like this with these things if we want them to be more active and not, sedentary all day at the same place.
Yeah, and that that's one of the reasons I kind of push back on that whole ambient heat movement.
Yeah,
is because you're giving them even less of a reason to move.
Right.
And unless you're going to keep them in a very large enclosure, where there might be, maybe the top is 84 and the bottom's 80 if you're doing ambient, because heat rises, maybe that would give them a reason to seek out something different. But I just don't. It seems like giving them more of a reason to sit
more incentive
to
not move, right,
is not the way to go.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any evidence to support that, but that's just kind of my.
No, I mean, it makes sense.
My initial thought.
My other female's in a cube, and she moves at night a little bit. She'll change perches, but she's in one of those sharp horn with the 3 perches in it, and
right.
She loves that top perch, man. She doesn't really like to move from it too much, but the other female, like I said, she's just back and forth all day long on that 4-footer.
Yep.
So it's really got me thinking about maybe rocking those more. And yeah, they do take up more space, but that goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of smaller collections. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, that's kind of where I'm moving to. I'm probably going to end up just keeping 2 or 3 pairs, and I want to keep them in like. I've got it all written down and planned in my head, but I'm yet to actually do it. I'll probably do it after I move. But I want those big like Rubbermaid troughs that people use for like monitors and stuff.
Yeah.
I want to get one of those and use it as the base and plant like a ficus tree or something in there.
Oh yeah.
And then build kind of a frame around it and make it like, maybe like 6 or 7 foot tall by like 3 by 2 or 3 by 3, and give them some like real serious vertical space.
Yeah.
As much as you can give them in a normal size
realistically
room.
Right.
Yeah, but one thing I also don't buy is this argument that just because they're not in the wild, there's no reason to try and emulate the wild.
Mm-hmm.
That
They're
it's
genetically
just such
ingrained to do what they do, whether they've been there or not.
well, it's just such a lazy way of keeping and thinking. It's just kind of justifying not trying to give them the best possible space you can give them.
Mm-hmm.
And just because they stay alive in a cube and maybe they breed in a cube, you know, I would venture to guess that most people in this community probably don't love factory farming, but you can't argue that they don't produce a crap load of animals that way.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
So no, we'll see. Maybe I'll kill all my animals and I'll be proven wrong, but I don't think so.
Now, what do you, as far like with your setups, them being naturalistic and everything like that? I'm assuming you probably don't miss them nearly as much as everyone seems to think you have to do with natural setups. Because I feel like when people think naturalistic vivaria, they're like dart frogs, where there's very little airflow, there's a ton of humidity, and it's just wet all the time. And it's like I don't. Do you have springtails in there? Are you having like microfauna? What's the kind of give us the rundown?
Yeah, I've got microfauna in there. It's more to keep the kind of mold fungus population from getting out of control, as opposed to the actual feces from the snake.
Yeah,
I do spot clean as it happens, just because I don't have the microfauna population to take care of that stuff quickly. As far as misting and humidity, that's another thing that's kind of been confused, in my opinion, within the hobby. Misting does not equal humidity. Misting is a very inefficient way to increase humidity. So I have, like I said, I have an evaporative humidifier in my room, and I have a lot of ventilation on my cages. So luckily I have like a separate room that I keep all my animals in.
Yeah.
And the humidifier keeps that around 60 to 70%. Keeps all the plants looking great. The animals aren't wet. It's water vapor in the air. But it makes it so that they don't have to constantly fight that dry air. Can they live in dry, air, 20 or 30% humidity? Of course. Many people have proven that. Is it ideal? Probably not. When an animal breathes, the air is instantly humidified, or at least the body is trying to humidify it so that it's easy on the lungs. And when you're keeping it in a dry environment, it is increasing the rate of dehydration of the animal, because that's how chemical gradients work. The water from in the tissue is going to try to go out to the air.
Yeah.
So, can they live that way? Sure. Should we strive for better? I think so.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it. I do mist animals here and there, but mostly it's just kind of a cycling tactic. Like this time of year, I'm not really misting a whole lot. Maybe in a shed, just to get the animals to drink a little bit more.
That's when I miss mine the most, is when they're going into a shed cycle. But other than that, I don't mess with mine. But being in South Carolina, humidity is rarely an issue.
Right.
For most of the year.
And then, I do have plants in there, so I water those.
Yeah.
But, I've never had a snake get an RI for misting it. That I think is a big.
I don't buy into that either.
Thing.
I think a lot of people don't realize, especially people that are kind of newer to the hobby, is like respiratory infections are a symptom of a bigger problem.
Right.
They're an indicator that there's something else going on, and it just happens to be something else you got to deal with. They think, if I miss my green tree too much, it's just magically going to get an RI. It's like, no, if the immune system's already having problems if you're getting an RI coming in. Like there's something compromising that already. So there's a much bigger issue.
Yeah. It's almost certainly always a husbandry issue. When people get these things cultured, it's almost always something that's always present. It's not like some new novel
right
disease. You know, I don't buy either that Nido is completely to blame, because that's probably been around forever, and most of our snakes probably have it. And whether it's deadly or not probably has to do with a lot of other circumstances.
Yeah.
So
that's always something too that I'm always super curious to hear about people's opinions on that and kind of what the deal is. Because after talking to Harlan and some other people, I'm a firm believer as well that it's not anything new. Like, this is something that's been around, longer than we have as a species.
Well, it's almost certainly not anything new.
Yeah.
I mean, things like that don't just pop up,
right?
But if you don't know to look for it, then you're not going to find it. And only recently somebody has looked for it, as far as I understand. So, and they happen to find it. And one of the major concepts of science is correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of other factors involved in why some of these animals get ill and why some don't. And take Buddy's animals, he had some that came back positive, but none of them ever showed symptoms. So why are, basically what I'm getting at is we may be trying to solve a problem that doesn't necessarily exist. And I doubt that we're ever going to really get rid of the virus. So we might as well try to figure out what other factors around it are really triggering it to be so virulent.
Yeah, what is it that's killing, these animals and not these animals? Because it wasn't that long ago. It was like last year, the year before last, where there was kind of the big panic, quote unquote, where people were like, "Oh, I got Nido," and then someone else at the same time was like, "Oh yeah, me too," and then they were like, "Well, what do we do?" And it was kind of like, "Well, there's nothing you can do." But if the snake's asymptomatic, I don't know, if you can't do anything about it, then but your animal's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I had people kind of friends that some of them tested, some of them didn't, and some of them that tested came back positive, and they were freaking out. And I'm like, and they were asking if I was going to test, and to this point I haven't, because I don't have anything that has given me any reason to. They're not symptomatic for anything. And I simply asked, well, how does that knowledge change your keeping behavior?
Exactly.
It doesn't. So what's the point in freaking out about it?
If you had not gotten the test done and you didn't know, you would have just kind of carried on, and there's nothing you can do about it anyways. So kind of like that just puts you right back to where you kind of started. Right.
So I don't fault anybody for wanting to have that knowledge. But for me, I'd like to see a little bit more information developed, and I like that Ian and all those people are going to support some research on it. Maybe we can get some more answers about it. But I'm just kind of watching closely and seeing how it evolves before I start freaking out about anything that doesn't seem to be giving. Maybe I don't have it in my collection, but even if I do, I'm not having any issues as a result of it. So I think everybody kind of just needs to calm down a little bit. It seems like a lot of people are.
That's the way I kind of feel about it.
Just wait for a little bit more information that's more concrete.
Can't panic over things you don't know about.
Right.
But I was, I had asked around about it, and I was kind of advised, because I was like, should I get my stuff tested? And I was kind of told I was told yes by some people, and then I was told no by other people, and the people that said no pretty much said on the basis of, okay, so you get a test that comes back positive, then what?
Right.
And it was kind of like, okay, good point. If they're all fine.
And then, some people may say, well, yeah, but you can separate those animals out that are positive. But then the other caveat is that one negative test or even 3 negative tests doesn't necessarily mean you have a negative animal.
Yeah, that's what I was also told.
So I could see if you have an animal with symptoms, testing it, because why not? But if there's no outward symptoms, then why are you looking for a problem that doesn't exist?
Mm-hmm.
At this point, at least is my kind of opinion on it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, hopefully we'll have some sort of answers here soon.
Yeah.
Currently, with the Southeast Carpet Fest auction, I think as of this morning, Ian was saying we're up to like over 11 grand in money raised so far, which we're gonna surpass the 12K that they made last year at Southeast Carpet Fest. Which this year it's all going to nidovirus research, so I think that'll help out a lot. I know a lot of that equipment and stuff they use is expensive, so I don't know how much it'll help, but I guess anything's better than nothing.
Yeah. I mean, at least if we can kind of get the ball rolling and kind of get some of these researchers to see a little bit of money come in and maybe get excited about it. Maybe in future events, people can continue to raise money for those projects, and it snowballs.
Well, it's definitely an uphill battle for the people that are actually doing the research, because if you're going to go to any institution that you work for and say, hey, I need some money to look into this. There are these snakes with this virus that we don't really know anything about, and there's a very small percentage of people actually keeping them, but we need you to give us thousands of dollars, if not more, to look into it.
Well, I would assume they'll probably assign it to some grad student who's looking for a thesis or something to that effect, and I don't think there's a whole. I could be wrong, but I don't think there's a whole lot of selling somebody has to do on that.
No, it just seems like
they're interested in taking up that project.
It seems like there would be bigger fish to fry, but I guess in that context, it makes more sense.
Yeah. Well, if somebody's giving you money for it, then I don't see why they would be opposed to seeking knowledge, whether the subject is lucrative or not.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a college dropout, so I can't say shit. I was a biology major for 3 semesters.
Yeah. Well, I've got a bio degree, and it's been an interesting road to try and make a living out of it.
Where'd you go to school?
Millersville University in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Pretty small school.
I kind of wish I had gone back, or at least waited more. Like after graduating high school, I kind of wish I had waited before jumping into college, because I got out of high school or graduated that for that summer, and then come August it was time to jump back in, and I felt like the same. I just I in high school I did pretty well at just kind of paying attention and passing, and I assumed I could carry that over into college, and was horribly wrong.
Yeah.
After a while, I told my parents, I was like, I'm done wasting your money. I'm just not into it. It wasn't my thing, but now I feel like if I had gone back, I'd probably be much more devoted to it and actually interested in half the stuff we were learning.
Yeah. The first couple of years can be hard to get through because it's very, very general. General concepts that you definitely have to learn, but they're not the most interesting if you've already got an interest in something.
Yeah, that was my problem.
In my last couple of years of college, I was taking animal behavior classes and marine bio classes and stuff that was much more geared towards my interests.
Yeah, that was the issue for me. It was like, I don't want to do any of this stuff that I have zero interest in. Like, I want to do all the cool stuff and none of the stuff that's not. And
yeah,
it's not how college works, so here I am.
Yeah.
But, I know Luke Myers. You're friends with Luke, right? Or you talk to him at all?
Talked to him a little bit, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he's currently doing, I think he was just doing an animal behavior class, and he's been taking all kinds of cool classes. He's in California, and he's enjoying it. But he seems like the kind of guy that he'll get a kick out of just about anything. He can find some way to be interested in it, some way or another. But
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff you can take, particularly in like your junior and senior year at a lot of different schools. Yeah. Unless you have a very specific direction, it can be hard to make a living with a degree like
Definitely. I think now more than ever too. You know, I've always wondered how difficult it is. Like, to me, I'm of the opinion that if you're you're majoring in a science, you really got to swing for the fences. Like, a 4-year degree isn't really going to cut it anymore like it used to.
Yeah.
You know, especially bio and marine. Like, I live on the coast here in South Carolina, and so everyone goes to college for marine biology. Then they graduate and they realize, like, finding a job that actually involves you doing the stuff you went to school for is, you know, they're almost non-existent unless you work for DNR or something, and those guys don't get paid a whole lot. So it's, I don't know.
Yep, and they all start at about $30,000 a year. So
yeah,
you're staring at a bunch of school debt and no way to pay for it.
Yeah. So what are your plans for the year as far as chondros go? Are you going to be breeding anything, or are you just going to wait until after the move? What's the game plan?
I may do a pairing next year. I'm kind of focused on the move and maybe trying to get a couple of those bigger enclosures built and keep a couple pairs together year round. I worked at Lowry Park Zoo in Tampa for about a year, and we kept a pair of chondros outdoors in Tampa together, and that I've never really stopped thinking about that in a way, you know, that I want to keep them that way.
Yeah.
Because it was just a lot more interesting to me. So yeah, I'll probably just focus on trying to do that stuff, and you know, I'd like to start getting into some really cool plants, you know, different PNG native orchids and ant plants and maybe some nepenthes. See if I can successfully keep those with chondros. I think that'd be a pretty interesting, fun project to try.
Aside from the pothos, what do you have in there now?
Actually, now that I look around, it's mostly just pothos right now. I've tried a few other different plants, and they just didn't provide the cover that I was looking for. Well, it's mostly just pothos right now, but if I can start working with some bigger enclosures, my options will open up quite a bit.
Definitely. Pothos are perfect for that stuff, man, because pothos will grow in a freaking dark closet. I think if you could grow pothos on Mars if you wanted to.
Yeah, and they just have a really good growth pattern. Like they'll grow up anything. They have big leaves. They're really kind of perfectly suited for that, especially in kind of smaller enclosures.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to have you send me some pictures again so I can post them on the podcast page to give everybody an idea what you're talking about. What are your temperatures? Sure. What do you keep your temperatures at with those?
Normally the hot spots are around 84.
Okay.
I usually do a night drop all year. In the summer, it's to like 80 on the warm end. My ambient room temperature is like 75, 76. So it is whatever it is on the other side. And in the winter, I'll just drop a couple of degrees at night unless I'm cycling. And then for breeding. And I don't ever really go below 72 or 73 when I'm cycling. 73 is kind of where I get some great activity out of the males, and then 72 I'll drop to after they've bred for a little while, and then that's like kind of the final nail in the coffin that'll get that female to go off food and really kind of kick it into gear.
And what time for, like, what part of the year are you usually doing that?
Well, prior to this past year, I always kind of did it, the traditional way in the fall, winter. This year, being in Colorado, I kind of tried something different because our nighttime temps are pretty low most of the year. Say maybe like July and August, or June, July. So this year we have like monsoon rains late August, mid to late August. So I started cycling during those, and that seemed to work out pretty well as far as breeding activity. And then this one egg that I'm incubating now was the result of that. So it wasn't completely successful, but I did like the activity that I got. There may just be some other tweaking that I wasn't recognizing that I would need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Try it again. But I won't get to try it again because I'll move in in a couple months.
Yeah.
So I'll get to figure it all out again. But I will say that I keep the room humid pretty much all year. And the misting that I do is just in the summer, just to kind of simulate a rainy season.
Yeah.
And it brings up the humidity a little bit, but I don't really get any of that like clicking or wheezing or any of that sort of stuff associated with breeding and cycling that a lot of people seem to do. And as a lot of my other theories, I don't have any way to really prove it, but anecdotally in my collection, I attribute it to keeping the relative humidity, decently high.
Yeah.
Because their lungs and their respiratory tract is not getting taxed like it would if I wouldn't be doing that. Here in Colorado, it's like 20% humidity in the winter, for the most part. And, I can feel it, and I'm fairly well acclimated to it. And I didn't evolve in the rainforest of Papua New Guinea for millions of years.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that they don't appreciate it either.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense. Chondros.
Another way of explaining to some people is, think if you were like a prisoner, you had to stay in some little room with very little air ventilation, no access to sunlight, and it was like 20% humidity every day. You'd probably live, but would you feel great? Probably not.
Yeah, there's a very big difference between surviving and thriving.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we're, by constantly simplifying, we're kind of doing them a disservice, and we're just not really doing them justice, in my opinion.
Definitely don't get much better as far as a display animal goes on a green tree. So
yeah, for sure.
Never have to worry about them not being visible. Unlike my 3 dart frogs that I never see.
What kind of dart frogs do you have?
They're Phyllobates vittatus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I got 3. I got 3 of them, and I honestly, they could all 3 be dead, and I wouldn't know it. But the fruit flies are disappearing, so at least one of them is eating.
Are they still pretty small?
Yeah, they're still youngsters.
Yeah, the males have a really, really loud, pretty call.
Mm-hmm. I play it on my phone sometimes to see if maybe they're big enough to start doing it.
If you get a mature male in there, when he gets a little bit bigger, you'll know he's alive, for sure.
They're so shy. And I was talking to my buddy Alex Minke about them because he has some. He's like, dude, I got a tank with 6 of them in there, and I never see them. He's like, they're fine. Like, they're in there. They're fine. Don't worry about them. You're not going to see them.
Yeah, I did dart frogs for quite a number of years too, and yeah, especially the thumbnails. Like sometimes we go like a month without seeing them. They're like, I hope I'm not just feeding an empty cage, but they seem to disappear.
I have another vivarium built and planted and going, and I'm going to get some Vanzolini in it at some point. So those will be my cool first thumbnails. I'm enjoying them, man. The vivariums are a blast to build. You have to take your time with them, which I think is kind of nice, because then you have time to think about what you want to go in it. And I don't know, they look cool. I got my Phyllobates tank is in here, and it's in the living room, and it looks awesome. It's a nice conversation piece. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and there's kind of an art to it too.
Definitely.
They're not all created equal. Everybody can make a 2-foot cube with paper towels in the bottom, but not everybody can make a really nice display vivarium. kind of have to have an eye for it.
Yeah. Well, you doing it has definitely kind of piqued my interest a little bit, and especially talking to you about it a little more. And it might be something I'll be looking into doing in the near future.
Yeah, so. I mean, I don't really. I try not to preach too much about it, but the one thing I do push back on when I talk to people about this sort of thing is I've definitely never lost a snake to keeping them with plants or soil or misting. None of those three have ever caused any of my snakes to become ill. I think stagnant air, along with that, is where a lot of people go wrong.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster. But I don't know. I mean, we see that debate so much on Facebook, and it's like, how many of you have actually tried keeping tubs and actually tried keeping, naturally? And it's the majority probably haven't. Like, everyone has their way and they enjoy it. Like, I keep pretty simple. I keep tubs, I keep paper towels, and that's just because that's what's been working for me. I haven't had that many issues with any of my animals. I have had some over the years, especially with the green trees, but granted, I've only been keeping green trees for about 2 years, but I can't really speak on behalf of, which one's better because I've never kept them that way. So I can only speak from the simple paper towel.
I mean, I can't really speak to which one may be better because I don't really keep things that simple anymore, but I definitely enjoy keeping them this way much more. And I don't have any of the issues that often get spread around as gospel when you keep them this way. So, and I think a lot of the people that talk about it, like you said, have no experience doing it. And they're just kind of regurgitating long held myths, that have been perpetuated for years and years and years. And
yeah, there's not a ton of evolution in the terms of how we do things.
I mean, you never go to a zoo or an aquarium and you see these things on display in an empty cube, do you?
Nope.
And they don't seem to be having any problems.
But I do see them mix dart frog species all the time. And they know they're not supposed to do it, but they do it anyways. Well,
I mean, there's nothing wrong with doing it. That's a whole nother can of worms. But if you're throwing out the eggs, then what are you really hurting? The frogs aren't going to hurt each other, especially in some of the size enclosures that they do it.
Right, and that's from what I've heard. That's the reason that they do that is because they're like, we can't just have 5 of the 5 leucomelis or something floating around in here. Like, people come to see these things, and like, this space is huge. We got to fill it up. It's got to have.
And often in at least some of the better zoos and aquariums, they're putting together species that coexist in the same range. They're not just putting random stuff together. I think it's, and since I've kind of delved into the dart frog community and what's necessarily right and wrong, but from what I understand, back in the day, the main source of that argument was, well, if they breed and the eggs hatch, how do you know they're not hybrids? And then if they're hybrids and you sell them, that's going to muddy the waters.
Yeah, I feel like it would be pretty obvious, though.
Basically the same argument with carpet pythons.
Right.
Why a lot of people don't like those being mixed.
Mm-hmm. You got your small group of purists, and then you got the guys that just want to make cool looking snakes, and to each their own.
Yep.
Personally, I prefer the I'm more of a pure guy. I like the the pure Darwins and stuff like that. But I do appreciate the brighter Jags and stuff like that. I can get behind them. Probably not going to buy them, but I like them. They're pretty.
Yeah, I've tried to keep a couple of different morphs of different species over the years, and I just can't help but look at them and be like, you shouldn't exist.
What's your opinion on Chondros?
I'm not a fan.
No.
Only for the fact I don't care what anybody does. It doesn't bother me that that some people like them and want to do it. but for me personally, I feel like uh, I've never seen a carpondra that looks better than a pure chondro or a pure carpet.
It's a very
They
good
always
point.
look like a
Yeah.
muddied version of the two.
Yeah.
And unless you're actually trying to pursue some sort of aesthetic um, goal,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the me personally, I don't see the point in doing it just for the sake of, hey, I crossed two things that should
Right.
never.
Here's a cool thing that I made.
Yeah,
That's genetically not gonna do well, as far as reproducing, and it just looks cool. I mean,
yeah,
like I said,
yeah.
I can appreciate them for the novelty of the whole thing, but it's not something I'm not gonna go drop $1,000 on a carpondra or a
Right.
jagpondra or anything like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, and a large part of the reason that I keep my animals the way I keep them is I like to try and stimulate as natural behavior as I can, and I can't afford to travel and stuff as much. Like I can't afford to spend 3 months in Australia just checking out chondros in the wild. So
That's a
this
luxury
is
a lot of
my
us don't have.
yeah. So this is my way of maybe being able to cut a little slice of that out and observe it in my own house.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and so I like I have a few designer animals that are, you know, as we now understand it, and not that it's been any secret, that there's definitely at least two different species of chondros. Maybe more. Who knows if maybe some of these island forms are more distantly related
Yeah.
than we thought, but they definitely have some differences morphologically than some of these different localities, or these pure species. Um, I know everybody says you can't call them pure, but when you get a wild caught biak, like it looks way. There's some obvious differences between like a wild caught roux. I mean, I've got both right
Definitely.
in front of me in my room, and they don't. I mean, yeah, they're both green, but they're pretty different.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Now, as far as what you've bred, what have you bred in the past, or most recently? What have been your pairings?
Chondro wise,
Yeah.
it's mostly biak stuff.
Okay.
So I've got this one egg was a pure biak pairing. Um, the one last year was a biak to a quote unquote, biak sarong. I think it was probably just a biak, but um, you know, and then previous to that, it's mostly just biak stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's always kind of been my main interest.
Gotcha. They're enjoyable. They don't get enough credit, man. Everyone kind of writes them off as nasty tempered.
Well,
and
just
cheap.
Just wait until they stop importing them. Then they'll be $5,000 a piece, and
Yeah.
everybody will want them.
Yep.
I mean, I have this male that I've used in my past few pairings, Tarzan, um, just John Irby's animal.
Mm-hmm.
He's every bit as nice as any calico designer for the most part. I mean, he's kind of a yellow orange, probably 50 to 60%, and then he's got kind of a mossy green with a black flecked baby pattern.
Yeah, I saw
And
one of the
some
neonates you
blue on the
posted of
side.
them. That red neo
Yeah, I
that you
mean,
had, that's a pretty cool looking baby.
yeah, yeah. And then I've got a really dark Biak female that's, there's some animals like some designer animals like that were crossed with Biaks that
Mm-hmm.
she looks pretty similar to some of those things. So, it's kind of funny how some of these things end up looking just as good, if not better, than the designers, but because there's no names attached to it,
Yeah.
people aren't willing to spend the money.
Yep. Agreed.
And,
Well,
I mean, I've got a few designers, and I'm honestly thinking about getting rid of a couple of them just because, they're they're just kind of weird.
In what way?
Well, like they don't look like either like any of the localities. Some of them are kind of quirky.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that there's anything genetic related with that,
Right,
but
right.
they're
That's something me and Luke talked about
just,
with the last episode was, how much with all these design lines and stuff that, how much diversity do we really have in that pool?
Right.
Nothing against designers. They're awesome. I love them. But
yeah.
something to think about.
I listened to it. Like you guys were saying, we're kind of in fairly uncharted territory as far as, so these are now defined as two different species,
mm-hmm.
and we've been crossing them back and forth for years and years and years, and there is potential that we're seeing, some sort of impact from all of that. And in the early days, a lot of this stuff was pretty closely bred. So, who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, and I guess the only time will tell. Long term.
Yeah. Yep.
But
Sure.
We're closing in on an hour and a half, man. Is there anywhere people can find you?
Pretty much just Facebook or Instagram. I have a Front Range Arboreals page. I don't know if I'll keep that the same name because I'm moving out of the Front Range, but it's
what are you
Front Range Arboreals.
What are you gonna call it if you're in Oregon?
I don't know. Maybe PDX Arboreals. I'm moving to the Portland area, but I don't know. I'll probably just keep it the same.
No.
But yeah, and then I'm Brian Fischer on Facebook. Happy to talk to people on there, mostly through Messenger. Like
mm-hmm.
I'm not too active on the groups as much anymore, but I'm happy to talk to people more privately.
Yep. I appreciate all the insight you've given me in the last couple weeks and talking to you off and on. I'm glad you came on, man.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody who wants to chat chondros and throw ideas back and forth, certainly don't claim to know a lot, but I've been watching them for 20 years, so I feel like I've gained some insight.
I know at least something about them.
Yeah, I know how not to kill them.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so it was a start.
Yep. All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you later.
For sure. Have a good day.
Take it easy.